The Black church has been the seminal force in shaping the history of the African American people. The history of the Black church explores the rich, complex, and nuanced history of faith since our ancestors arrived on these shores all the way to the 21st century.
The church gave people a sense of worthiness. I don't know how we could have survived as a people without it.
To tell this story adequately, I turned to major leaders of the Black church and major social figures in our country, including my friends John Legend and Oprah Winfrey, Yolanda Adams, Pastor Shirley Caesar, Kirk Franklin, and a host of scholars across the country.
We had to have some individual and institutional armor in order to preserve our sanity.
Our watch was lost.
Music's really the language of the Black church. Spirituals and gospel are woven into the foundation of the church.
The role of music in the Black church is everything.
It sets the tone for how you will feel when the word comes forth.
Women are the backbone of the church.
People need to know that before it was Martin's dream, it was Prathia's prayer.
Women were preaching, they were teaching. They were fighting for our political rights outside of the church, but also fighting for their rights to preach within the church.
We were very quick to address racism, but very slow to address sexism.
At critical moments in our history, you will find the church at the center of our collective life, playing a pivotal role of anchoring our people and inspiring them to greatness.
The Black Church, now streaming only on PBS.
Well, I certainly feel a range of emotions, excitement, a little sadness there. So we're going to go ahead and get into the virtual conversation. And thanks everybody for staying on. We got a lot of comments in the chat box. So many things were discussed. This is just a preview of what you're going to see February 16th and 17th on MPB television for the full documentary. But they talked about sexuality, racism, women. Reverend Rhodes, I want to begin with you. You have been described as a race man, somebody who is concerned with the advancement of Black people, as are the other panelists as well. Just curious about your response to people who do not align with the idea of a white Jesus. There's a racial awakening, and folks are saying, hey, we don't align with the type of Christianity that the former president, those Christians align with. So your thoughts on that about people who are conflicted with that racial and religious situation?
Sure. Well, one thing I would say is that I'm glad the documentary is out. We have to have a better understanding of complexities and nuances of the Black church and its history. First of all, there is no monolithic Black church. There are varieties of ways that different Christians of African descent have expressed their faith. Raphael Warnock, now Senator Warnock, wrote in his book, The Divided Mind of the Black Church, that the Black church was a church born fighting for freedom. And so I think there is a freedom thread through a lot of our churches. I was thinking about a quote from Howard Thurman that I think sums up very powerfully what our enslaved ancestors had to navigate and what they offer us in the way that we understand the faith. Howard Thurman said, by some amazing but vastly creative spiritual insight, the slave undertook the redemption of a religion that the master had profaned in his midst. So this notion that, the white man's religion, white folk just made Black folks Christian, denies the agency that our enslaved ancestors and folks through Reconstruction and Jim Crow offered up as they sought to reconcile their Blackness and their faith in Christ. And they came to the conclusion, I think rightly so, that Jesus is not white. I was actually talking to a pastor friend of mine today about an interesting childhood memory I had, Sister Pamela. I was a first grade student at Hazelhurst Elementary, and it was around Christmas time, and we were told to color these images of the nativity scene. Well, I colored every one in that picture: Mary, Joseph, Jesus, the angels, various shades of brown. My white first grade teacher said, you got to do this assignment over again. I said, why do I have to do it over again? She said, because Jesus is white. You have to do it over again. I said, no. I said, I'm looking around the room. All of us are brown skinned, so I'm going to keep it that way. She threatened to take me to the principal's office. I had to go to see the principal. The principal said, he's a black man, right? He said, you've got to change it because Jesus is white. Called my mama. My mama came over and cussed everybody out. My dad, a civil rights attorney, threatened to sue the school. I had to keep that. I kept the picture with brown folk in it. But that story is a microcosm of what so many in the Black church had to do. We had to continue to demonstrate that Jesus is not white, that there is a space and place in imagining this brown-skinned Palestinian Jew from the first century, whose love, whose grace, whose liberation is for everybody, including Black folks. And so when I hear people say Christianity is a white man's religion, I want them to spend a little time and talk with some of us who would argue different, and to see, we may not all agree on how to achieve those ends, but that there's much more agreement on how we lift and liberate our people than some would argue simply because they see a white painting in some church of their youth.
Okay, and Ms. Pamela, if you could weigh in on knowing your history, because the documentary, it touched on hush harbors when enslaved people had to secretly praise and worship. Could you talk a little bit about knowing your history, how to seek that knowledge, and then how to apply it?
You know, it's very important. And, you know, you think about childhood and you think about your grandparents and how they went to church and what they learned and what they taught you. But there's this awakening that we all have to have in order to seek the true knowledge and understanding Africa and understanding that the creation of all people from Africa, and understanding that when we look at the regions of how the Bible talks about the history, then we see the history, then we understand that there weren't these lily white people that were over in Africa. So we understand. Now, some people may not want to hear the truth, but the truth is that God made us in his image, and his image is of. And so if we think in those terms, then we understand, and we're able to go out and tell the truth and give the exact and true knowledge of what the history is of God and how we should embrace it.
Now, Bishop Crudup, thank you for that, Ms. Pamela. Bishop Crudup, you have, and along with Reverend Rhodes, you've been on the front lines. You had rejected the Confederate flag, and now we know that it has changed. How do you decide what issues you want to speak up on? When we see the Charleston Nine, do you ever get nervous about speaking up on certain issues? How do you decide, well, I'm going to take a stand on this, a stand for a social justice?
Well, you know, the great thing about the church is that the church is all about challenging, you know, notions, challenging power, challenging status quo, and bringing righteousness, you know, in the midst of it. And wherever there is denial, and, you know, the white church, which at one time would have been the predominant church in this nation, you know, was in denial and determined to make God in their own image, which is a part of that original sin of this nation that we're still struggling with today. Then, you know, our forefathers understood that that those folk were wrong. And they begin to work to bring about change. We're still doing that. And, you know, God gives us sight to see things that need to be addressed, that needs to be changed. And, you know, we're called to do this. And so there's so many things that need to be worked on that we don't have a challenge about what's next. You know, what else can we do? Because there's just a lot of issues that need to be dealt with.
Now, Ms. McBride, one of the things that struck me was the part about the music and the freedom songs and how they carry the civil rights movement, and they would sing the songs so they wouldn't be afraid in the face of danger. And then they talked about the secular music. I'm curious to know your personal opinion about, do you feel that gospel music is still transformative, or are there so many genres and so many styles that it is losing its effectiveness in a way?
I agree with what the question you asked. Do I believe that it's changing? Absolutely. As long as there's life, there will always be evolution of thought, you know. And you're talking about how theology marries with doxology. I want to deal with the word truth for just a moment. We have to understand that wherever you got a body over here and a body over here and a body over here, you got 6 people, you got 6 opinions. And all opinions don't have to be right, okay? The truth is we have learned a lot of things wrong in the Black church, and we have learned a lot of things wrong in the church of all churches, because a lot of us came up with our own ideologies, a myology. This is what I believe. Well, the problem has been with that is that somehow the Bible became less and less and less important. And that is the map that takes us to truth. And the truth is, until we get back to the book, we're going to continue to have these evolutions where we're going to lose a little bit more. I use the word L-U-L-L-E-D. You know how you take a baby and you stroke the baby, you rock him, feed him, and you stroke him, and you sing a lullaby. You sing a song. I think that we have been lulled into downside of some things that we need to upsize. Sometimes we major in the minors, and we need to major in the majors. And that way, the message of the music in the church gets lost. But I have to celebrate this. I have a lot of young people I know that stand on my shoulders and reach high. I'm a 72-year-old good-looking woman, okay? But listen, the people that sit on my shoulders, I'm pushing them to reach higher. I need you to be smarter than me. I need you to be wiser than me. I need you to find out where truth is, stay there and don't change it. Deal with the truth and do all your styles. On a personal note, all music to me has spirit, okay? Even the blues, the father of gospel music, Black church music, we call it, is Thomas Dorsey, 1930, okay? He was a jazz musician, a blues musician, composer, but his wife died, his child died, and he wrote Precious Lord, Take My Hand. Where was that birthed out of? And I was birthed out of a need. The Black church exists right now because there will always be a need for people to find their voices, take these feelings and these emotions and put them in the right place, plug them in the right place, so you won't abuse your brother. You know, the message of the church and the message of civil rights, that the freedom singers, they were dead on. They may not have had the best voices all the time, no more than our churches do now. But when you hear the music and your spirit reach out and it touches you, it'll take you to a place of truth. We need to get back to the truth as a church through the preach word and through the singing word. Stop beating up on each other and stop criticizing our young people and teach them. How can you criticize what they're doing and you're not teaching them? You don't have an audience with them. You got to have an audience with somebody in order to give them some instruction on your ideas. How can you criticize what they're doing and you haven't taken the time to love on them, to tell them? But instead, we've been feeding this thing and lulling and patting, and stuff been birthed in the church that has nothing to do with what the church is about. But I celebrate young people who are writing songs. Those, what is it, Colossians 3 talks about hymns, psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. We've got a lot of songs out there, a lot of styles. Sometimes you got to weed through them to find out where the truth is, okay? You got to go and see what songs are speaking the truth that came from the word of God. Some churches may not want the Bible in their church, okay? And all that comes back again to different ideologies from different people. The church means what it means to you. There's a word called koinonia. Koinonia means fellowship, communion, okay? Phil Hollis. Another man done gone. Another man done. Somebody singing over here, somebody singing over here, somebody singing over there. What they're doing is passing the word that a man has died. Swing low, sweet charity, coming for to carry me home. That means another man done died. They're passing it from all over the plantation. They get the word. Guess what that is? Koinonia, communion, fellowship. That was the church, but there was no building. So the church didn't just get started. The church has been in our relationship and our intimacy with each other, how we join together. We just happen to build a building and put folk in it. And we call it the Black Church, and that's wonderful. It's doing what it's doing, but it's about the fellowship. It's about getting the message right. And young people, go forth, get it right.
Yes.
This is our story.
The Black church has sustained the African American people from the days of slavery to this day.
I don't know how we could have survived as a people without it.
The role of music in the black church is everything.
We had to have some individual and institutional armor in order to preserve our sanity.
We are a testament to the goodness and the grace of God.
The Black Church, now streaming only on PBS.